Over 2 million people in the United States are suffering from opioid use disorder, and more than 100 people die every day of an opioid overdose. Opioids are a class of drugs that include prescription pain relievers such as oxycodone, illegal drugs such as heroin, and synthetic opioids such as fentanyl. Limits have been placed on opioid prescriptions. However, this has led to an increase in illicit opioid use. Misuse of drugs has also increased during the pandemic. It is estimated that there was a 30% increase in overdose deaths during the first year of the pandemic. Opioid addiction remains a public health problem. This is no more evident than in Appalachia. Generally, Appalachian counties have higher opioid overdose death rates than non-Appalachian counties. Appalachians struggling with opioid use disorder encounter additional barriers, such as a lack of transportation, housing, access to care, and steady employment. These challenges make it harder to achieve long-term recovery. Another challenge that people with opioid use disorder face is the stigma associated with drug addiction. There are many negative stereotypes of people who use opioids, including that they are weak, dirty, dangerous, and untrustworthy. Stereotypes can create an environment of shame and fear that prevents people from seeking help. Alternatively, offering support for people with substance use disorder has benefits. When people are treated with dignity and feel supported, it can buffer against stress, promote resilience, and aid recovery. People turn to close others when coping with stressful experiences. And for people with opioid use disorder, communicating with friends and romantic partners can have an influential role in how they manage addiction. But not all close relationships are panaceas. Close others can also provide support that is inconsistent, inconsiderate, or dismissive. Sometimes the ones we love stereotype us or call us names, and that can actually make us feel more stigmatized. And that is what I focus on in my program of research, how the communication with close others about opioid use can be both beneficial and harmful. I'm going to share results from 2 studies that I did with my co-author, Dr. Laura Miller, who is in the audience. I interviewed people who were actively using drugs, in treatment, and in recovery. I also interviewed their romantic partners and family members. In total, I conducted 44 interviews throughout Appalachian, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia. The first study explored how romantic partners cope with opioid addiction. I asked people with opioid use disorder about the supportive and unsupportive messages they received from their romantic partners. I also asked romantic partners if and how they offered support. The first quotes that I'm going to share are from a romantic couple, a married couple. Harry, who is receiving medication-assisted treatment, said, "My wife's judged me. She kind of judges me now because I'm on the Suboxone program." His wife agreed. Like him, to me, he's a weaker person because he can't stop. And this shows how his wife is a source of judgment. In the next quote, Veronica talks about why she might not actually want to talk about opioid use. She said, "It's like sometimes you don't want to talk about getting better because it makes you realize how bad you are. In this case, seemingly positive communication about recovery actually is disheartening." And then in the next quote, Kirk talks about how a romantic partner is both a necessity and a liability. He says, "I can't do it myself. I don't have anybody in recovery. Loneliness sucks. That's when I would use the most." At the same time, he says when he got in an argument with his romantic partner, that's what led to his relapses. And then finally, I'm going to share a quote from Lucy, who uses drugs. And she has a partner who also uses drugs. And she says, "I could be real sick, like withdrawing, and he'll still tell me I'm the most beautiful woman in the whole world." For Lucy, having a partner who uses drugs with her actually helps with understanding and bolsters her self-esteem. Together, these quotes show how a romantic partner can provide support that is paradoxical in nature. Now I'm going to share some quotes from a study I did where I asked people how they talk about opioid use with their family members. In the next quote, Clarissa talks about how people who use drugs have rules to show respect to family members. She says, "I don't tell my mom when I'm using. I don't take it in her house or nothing like that, because she doesn't want needles and shit like that in her house. It's just a respect thing." So for Clarissa, she actually sees herself as acting respectfully towards her family members. As I said, not all communication from family members is helpful. In the next quote, we see that a mother actually gets pressure from her daughter to use drugs. She says, when I come around, I'm not fun anymore. And my daughter actually told me, if you don't get high, you can't stay here. I'll also share a quote from a daughter who is in recovery and has a mother who undermines her self-esteem. She said of her mother, my mom, she always looks at my face. Are you okay? Are you all right? Have you had anything? And her reaction is, why is it that every time you look at me, I've had to have had something? So she's in recovery, but her mother undermines her self-esteem. And then finally, a quote from Scott, who positions communication as vital to breaking the cycle of addiction. I do get to see my son. He knows about my addiction. I first told him last year. He didn't know I had a problem, but I wanted him to know and be educated. Altogether, these quotes highlight how communication with close others can be both beneficial and harmful in managing addiction issues. Moreover, sometimes communication operates in paradoxical ways. A romantic partner who uses drugs might be a source of understanding and support, whereas a partner who is sober may be more judgmental, or family members may pressure one another to use drugs. It is my hope that these findings illustrate that any efforts to address the opioid epidemic through public health initiatives or policy need to be accompanied by efforts to capitalize on the supportive resources people have, while also alleviating or reducing the stigma that surrounds opioid use disorder.